Hello and welcome to Soul Basics Soul Chat. Today we are talking with Tiffany Barnes. Tiffany is a writer, a speaker, and an empowerment coach. She is one of the most incredible people I have come to know. And just so that I don't get any of these details wrong or miss any of these important facts, I'm actually going to refer to my notes at this time. After enduring physical, mental, and sexual abuse, Tiffany was emancipated at the age of 15. While working 3 jobs to support herself through high school, Tiffany became a sterling scholar and graduated at the top of her class. An athlete herself, Tiffany was a torchbearer for the 2002 Olympics. She is the founder of S.H.A.R.E, which stands for Sharing Hope for the Abused Through Resilience and Empowerment. What was originally a small advocacy group for students is now a 503 national foundation, meaning that it is approved by the IRS as a nonprofit charitable organization. And most recently, Tiffany published her debut book, The Throwaway Girl. Welcome, Tiffany. I am so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm so grateful for you. I truly am. Can you please share with us your story?
Sure. Well, first of all, you're reading my bio, and I was like, wow, that sounds like an incredible person. I'm like, oh,
Well,
wait a
you
second.
are. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I would love to share my story. I'll give you a brief version because there's quite a lot that happened to me growing up. But as you mentioned, I was emancipated at a young age, 15 years old. And that was due to all forms of abuse that I had endured at a young age, from my earliest memory until that emancipation at 15, sexual, emotional, physical, mental abuse had, taken place in my life. And it inspired me so much to write a book, as you mentioned. But there's a gap between 15 and 40 years old when I released this book. So, I was told from, again, my earliest memory that my mother would say, I wish that I would have had an abortion, or I wish I would have thrown you away, or, just all kinds of mental, things that were putting me down that, when you're a child and the person that brings you into the world tells you you're worthless and they don't even want you. And if they would have known who you would have come to be, they would have definitely aborted you. That takes a toll on you, as much as you want to deny it or say, no, that's not who I am, and try to be resilient to it. You're a child, you're like a sponge. So you start to absorb those words and negative affirmatives. So it was something that I grew up not having a high self-worth. And my mother, unfortunately, did a lot of things that was very manipulative. For an example, she'd give me a piece of candy when my dad was away at work. And, when you're a child, candy's great. You want candy, and she'd be like, hey, do you want one of dad's special caramels? And I'm a kid again. I would love to have a piece of candy, and I'd take it and eat it. And then my dad would come home and she'd say that I stole it. And so then I would endure the consequences of beatings because, eating my dad's special caramels, for an example. So she did a lot of these manipulative things to me. And she unfortunately was very promiscuous. And so when my dad was away at work, she had a lot of men over to the house, and she would lock me up in a small utility closet with alcohol and tell me that I couldn't come out until all the alcohol was gone. So, I would be a drunk 6-year-old working in the dark, cutting my hair, found a pair of scissors, started going to town on my hair, or I would get nauseous and throw up all over myself. Or, want to go to the toilet to throw up. And then I'd get, beaten by her because I came out of the closet while she was, trying to do her thing with these various men. So, that's just kind of a taste of my story and some of the torture that my mom put me through. And then when my parents divorced when I was 7, my dad stopped physically beating me. So he was beating me as well. A lot of that was because he was so angry at my mom, and my mom had always threatened to leave, and he just never wanted that to happen. So I was the punching bag for his anger so that, he wasn't taking it out on her. And so every time there was a fight, I would just cringe knowing that this wasn't going to end well for me. So I was very relieved when my parents divorced. Unlike most children, they're very devastated. I was very relieved because that meant that my dad would no longer, beat me because my mom wasn't around to upset him. So, but aside from that, my dad still is something that I'm working on a relationship with him today, because there are some things that he still, mentally and emotionally tries to do to me, but I have forgiven him. And I have forgiven him because I feel like if I don't, it's like a cancer in my body, right? And that's really important to forgive. And that's a big piece of healing. And that's maybe something we can talk about here a little bit later in the conversation. But fast forward to 15, I ended up working 3 jobs my senior year, and was on a work release program. So I got to leave school at about noon to go work my first job. And then I waitressed after that first job. So I was a cashier at a department store. And then on the weekends, I picked up my 3rd job. So I was paying rent my entire high school career, and having all of the adult responsibilities. So I when I tell people I'm 40, I feel like I might be older for some reason, because all of this life experience that I've been through. But I did the emancipation as a means to protect myself so that my mother wouldn't declare me as a runaway. And the reason I did that was I was living with her from 7 years old until 13 years old. And at 13 years old, I had spoken up about some sexual abuse that was taking place from my stepfather. My stepfather was a military police officer, not at the time, but he had been in the past. And he just had this very stoic personality, but also very, picture Barney Fife, like that stature, tall, but kind of hunched over, but not funny in any way. He was just he had this demeanor that was very scary. And he would constantly say, if you say anything to anybody, I'll kill you. And he had abused my mom as well. And I had believed that if I did say anything, that he would kill me. So I kept my mouth shut. And this is something that a lot of people who've been through trauma and abuse go through. So when I finally did say something, he denied it and gave my mother an ultimatum. And the ultimatum was to choose between me or him. And my mother said I had 24 hours to get the thief out of the house, and had a yard sale and sold my items in front of me. And that's where I kind of became the throwaway girl. All of my belongings were in a trash bag, and I jumped on the local bus here in Utah, which is where I live, and started my new journey. From 13 to 15, I went and lived with my dad and a family friend between those 2 years. And my mother was just, again, very manipulative, that I didn't want her to turn me in as a runaway. So the next logical step was either foster care or emancipation. And I took the chance on emancipation because it seemed like the best route for me at the time. But it was very scary because there was only one other case at my age that had ever won an emancipation. And so I went for it, and luckily became the 2nd case in the state of Utah. So that's kind of the brief version. I don't want to take up too much time. As you mentioned, I started a nonprofit in high school that was more of a support group, ended up winning the torch in the Olympics. And that's kind of the brief version without telling you the whole book.
You are amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I'm just letting it sit with me for a moment. There's so many things I want to ask you. Let's start with, how did you start to heal?
I think the biggest healing piece for me was the forgiveness factor. Forgiving those who did what they did to me, because when you are grieving the loss of a parent, like I was, my mother, I definitely had a mother wound I was carrying for a very long time. I did become suicidal at one point in my life because I felt if the woman who gave me life doesn't want me, what's the point of having a life? And so I think the biggest part of the healing that started for me was forgiving my mom for what she did. And again, the reason I did that is it was just eating me alive, and it was creating a huge void and darkness in my life. And so once I was able to get to that point, which took years, there was no like, snap of a finger or flip of
No.
a switch. When I got to that point to be able to like finally not accept what she did, because that's not what forgiveness is, but more so maybe understand why she is the way she is based on the past that she lived, because it is generational. I think it really helped shift my perspective in realizing too that this wasn't going to define me. This was going to be a stepping stone to some greater things in life. So I would say that was the beginning of my healing journey.
Wow. It's interesting you say that, looking at her life and how she was raised, and that generation, and how that helped you with your with the process of forgiveness. I'm not going to say it was the main thing. It was like the process. I often think that, in life we become victims of victims, that um, because of how maybe some people in like how our parents have been raised, it is going to affect. And we can only say it's like the buck stops here, like it has to stop here at some point. And to be able to forgive is it says a lot about you as a person. I don't think a lot of people would have been able to come to that point of forgiveness that you have. And like you say, it definitely was a process over years. Um, is there something uh, through those years that also helped you come to that feeling of forgiveness?
I would say writing.
Okay.
So for me to get whatever those feelings were or those thoughts were down on paper, to for me it was like metaphoric of like physically purging it from my body. That was very important in that whole process as well. So maybe writing my mom a letter of all the hateful things I might feel about her because of what had taken place in my life, or
Yeah.
um, a lot of poetry. I did a lot of poetry at one point in time. Or just writing it down and burning it, writing it down and throwing it away. It was just such a healing piece for me. I mean, by the time I was 13, I probably had 25 to 30 journals. I
Yeah.
was constantly writing, and there's a point within that I started to name my journal. Her name was Aubrey. So it was almost like I was writing to a pen pal or a friend.
Really?
Wasn't being judged, so it was kind of like my own therapy. I did a lot of talk therapy, a lot of traditional therapy. But what really I feel impacted me the greatest was writing. And that's kind of how I got to the point of writing a book eventually. But, writing things down that I wanted to say because I knew she wouldn't listen. But it's still, I wasn't carrying it with me anymore, if that makes sense, by getting it down.
Yeah. You're such um you're such an inspiration to so many people, and you started this organization called S.H.A.R.E. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I was known in high school as the girl with the special circumstance, and I was bullied a little bit because of it. A lot of kids were jealous of me because of it. So because I was emancipated, for those of you who don't know what that means, I was literally my own guardian. So I could check myself in and out of school. I could write myself my own S.H.A.R.E notes. I mean, it was a dream to some kids if you think about it. Like, this, like, I like hide notes and forge signatures of my parents because I'm sloughing school or things like that. And I could have done it. I could have not shown up to school and written on my notes, and they would have had to accept it. And I remember distinctly, I was walking into third period, which was Miss Linares, my Spanish teacher, and I was late. I used to ride the bus across town to get to school. I had a car as well, but it would break down. So when it broke down, I didn't have any to fix it. I rode the public transit. Well, I walk in, I'm writing a note to my teacher, please excuse Tiffany Barnes for being late. Thank you, Tiffany Barnes. And handed it to my teacher. And there was this kid on the front row. And he's like, well, that's not fair. We don't get to write our own S.H.A.R.E notes, and said some things. just kind of looked out and went to my seat. And I really didn't want any spotlight on me. I had enough spotlight on me, I felt like, for being a special circumstance kid in school. Bell rings, class is dismissed. I walk into my next class, and I had some kids like, why are you writing charting notes? They're following me into the house, asking these questions, and I'm emancipated. And you didn't know what that meant. And, I would say, hey, I was abused at home. I was paying $500 a month rent to live in this basement apartment I was living. And, oftentimes living on kidney beans and crackers because I didn't have the money. I'd have to make that money stretch, or ramen noodles, typical, non-expensive, not great food items for you. And all of a sudden, these kids were like, I've never said anything to anybody, but somebody's touching me. Or my friend is getting beat by his dad all the time, and he doesn't want anybody to know because he doesn't want to break up his family. It was almost like I became a magnet for these kids to come out and say something. And I think a lot of it was because I was their peer. I was their age. I was the one that did something about it. Maybe they found solace in that. And so I started a support group for kids like me back in 1998 that had been going through some form of abuse or had been. Yeah. And at the time, it stood for sharing hope for the abused through resilience and empowerment. I'm sorry, students. Let me back up. Students helping the abused react and empower. I give you the acronym of what it is today. So students helping the abused react and empower. And that's what we did. Taught each other how to react in a positive way, and then empower each other to continue on that path. Where I went to school was Kearns High School. And anybody that's watching this that knows Kearns, it's not the greatest school. Kids would say, do you have to wear a bulletproof vest to school? Like, we had a lot of gang activity, and it just wasn't a great school. And so I very easily, and all of these kids in this group could have very easily turned to drugs, teenage sex, pregnancy, all the things, alcoholism. And so we just kept each other on this straight and narrow path to be good kids, not do those things. And it just kind of steamrolled into a national 501c profit, 501c3 profit through the years. I was starting to speak in different classrooms, different schools, telling them how to recognize abuse, how to report abuse, how you can report abuse and still, survive, and all of these things. And so that's kind of where it is today. It's still standing strong and still making an impact in the community.
Sorry, I'm very emotional from this. I am just imagining, all of the students and people you have helped over the years. Thank you for doing that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
It's beautiful that you've done that. Can I ask, one of the things that you were helping to teach the students is how to react. What would that look like?
So the biggest thing is to react in a positive way, right? Kind of like I just told you, whether it's journaling, whether it's joining a sport. Like, I was in basketball, that was a way to take out some. She also was in bowling. So, like, if I was angry, go throw that ball as hard as you want down the lane and smash some pins.
Oh, I love that.
So, finding positive ways to let out anger and emotion, because when you're a teenager, you're kind of like, oh, body and those hormones flowing, whatever, even as a young man, like, you just have so many things, going on within yourself that it's so confusing in itself, plus going through the abuse as well.
Yeah.
And so it was more about finding positive ways to react, and then also reading books on maybe how to find your voice, or watching motivational talks about it. When I was in high school, there was a guy named John, by the way, and he was a motivational speaker. He came and did a talk at our school, and I had a set of tapes. I still have them to this day, and I'm like, hey, you take these tapes home tonight and listen to them. And just even being a shoulder to cry on, because a lot of us, we didn't feel like we could go home and tell our parents how we were feeling, because it could result in getting beaten or talked down to, or your self-worth just going down because you think you're making shit up, pardon my language. But so it was more so just like, again, support, but then finding positive outlets to let go of some of this anger or grief or whatever it's feeling inside that might be negative.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. When did you start writing The Throwaway Girl? And what was that process? I mean, you said that you had been journaling for years. So what was that process like when you finally said, okay, you know what? My story is going to come out. This is what I'm going to do. How did that process start for you?
I love that question. So I was 18 years old. I graduated when I was 17, and when I was 18, I started doing a lot of speaking. So elementary schools, junior highs, high schools, where I would do an assembly on my story, but then again, recognizing the signs of abuse, or teachers would say, hey, we think this kid might be going through something at home. So I would stay for lunch and walk around and socialize with the kids and try to get them to open up. Sometimes we would have like a counselor there to chat with them or something like that. But I had a guy in the audience. His name was Dan Clark. And if you don't know the name Dan Clark, he is a national best-selling author, and he's a Hall of Fame speaker. I didn't know that at the time. But him and his wife had seen me give my presentation. I can't remember exactly where, but he had come up to me after and he had said, hey, my wife and I want to take you to lunch. And, 18 years old, free lunch. Yes, please. So I was like, sure, I'll go with this stranger to lunch. So I meet them, we make arrangements, and I meet them for lunch. And he has this stack of books in front of him. He's written in Chicken Soup for the Soul. He has Puppies for Sale that became a Hallmark movie. So if you're not familiar with Dan Clark, go check out his books. But he pushes this stack of books over to me, and I'm like, what is this? And he's like, these are books I've written. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like, never met an author before.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, you need to write a book. Like, no, I don't have enough of a story to write a book. And he's like, you do. I watched you today. You need to put your story down for others to say to you. And I kind of laughed it off, but it was enough of an inspiration to make me to think more about it. And I don't know how long I sat on it, but I'll say within a 6-month time frame or something, just write some things down and see. And that began my journey writing. And so it took me 22 years to finish it. I think a lot of that is perfectionism. When you've been through trauma, any trauma, but I feel like specifically a lot of trauma you tend to be a people pleaser and perfectionist. So I tell people called CDO, which is OCD, but the letters have to be important.
I'm sorry. Say again. You're kind of muffled out a little bit. So you said CDO.
Yeah, CDO, okay. Which is really OCD, but the letters have to be
okay.
That's a joke, by the way.
Okay, sorry. I just
no, because
maybe it's my OCD trying to figure it out.
OCD, but the letters have to be in order. It's a joke, but that's okay. So
no, it's actually my perfectionism trying to figure that out. That doesn't make sense, but okay. But yes, it is funny because anybody that has OCD, it's gonna irritate and gnaw at them, most definitely.
Right. Yeah, and I think when you come from chaos, as I have and a lot of trauma survivors have, it's your way of having control. So I would write, this sounds so elementary. This doesn't even sound good enough, and so I'm like, erase, rewrite, erase, rewrite. And then I, had just gotten to a point where it was nagging so much that, I finally had to seek some professional opinions on how it looked and help me edit it a little bit because I was so stuck in my own. So I was able to get that person to help me edit and put things into a perspective that made sense.
Thank you for sharing that. It is quite a process. I mean, 22 years to get all of that down. and to get it out in the way that you felt comfortable with. You are such a marvel and such an inspiration to so many, and I am so grateful for you, for taking the stand, for being courageous, and creating programs such as S.H.A.R.E and helping people, young people, in such a positive and way, so that they can get help themselves, or if they can't get help themselves, that they can help themselves, you know. What makes your soul soar?
Say empowering others to
Yeah,
see their light and to shine their light as well. In my book, I talk a lot about the light,
yeah,
torch, carrying the torch in the Olympics. And there were other times in my life where I had just a tiny little spark that to get on. And I think what really gets me out of bed every day and makes my soul soar to the heavens is to be able to inspire others to see their own light and then feed their own to continue to build. I think that oftentimes social media, comparing ourselves to others, and all the bullying, teenage suicide, social media, and I can't even imagine social media and Facebook. What I was going through was enough, but added to the mix. So I'm just really passionate about helping everybody of all ages finding that light in the darkness and they might feel like they are, and shining on. So, hey, come this way. I promise you can make it out of this tunnel. And that just really helps me sort of.
well, Tiffany, keep shining your light, your torch, to help others see theirs. Thank you so much, and I hope that we can have you on this show again. You are such an inspiration, and I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's been an honor today.